So till the speaker joins, can you just guys tell me why is that consulting as a domain like it attracts you so much, or why you guys want to pursue consulting or not something in core finance, say investment banking? So till the speaker joins, like I would can you just guys tell me why is that consulting like it attracts you so much, or why you guys want to pursue consulting or not something in core finance, say investment banking? So till the speaker joins, like I would can you just guys tell me why is that like it attracts you so much, or why you guys want to pursue consulting or not something in core finance, say investment banking? So till the speaker joins
is here. So yeah, we will beginning. There you can start.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and our fellow career enthusiasts, a very, very warm welcome to the first session of the third edition of our annual Placement Bootcamp Age and Place. We are your hosts for today, Dev and Satvik, and I would like to share with you a little fortune cookie tip. Is that it's rightly said that consulting is a very knowledge-based industry. If you're not constantly updating your knowledge, you are falling behind.
Get ready to embark on a transformative journey as we dive into the diverse world of consulting and its allied branches. By the end of the session, you will have the tools and wisdom to understand the vast landscape of consulting, its various specializations, and the impact it can have on businesses and careers alike. So, are you guys ready for the session? Come on, guys, a little enthusiasm from your
Some
end.
enthusiasm.
Wow, that's great. Since the spirits are already high, let me throw a question at you. What consulting specialization do you think is going to be the next big thing, other than management consulting, of course?
Tech consulting.
Before we go forward in this session, we would appreciate that if you could just type out the answers, because we want to look at the answers like together, and it's also going to help us when we do the Q&A round. So you guys can just put your answers in the chat box. We'll read them. Strategy consulting, tech consulting, interesting answers. Anything other than the very common tech, strategy, or financial. Like we want to hear a little obscurer. Marketing consulting, okay.
Wow, so it seems like we have a variety of interesting perspectives coming from everyone present in this meeting. Especially something like marketing consulting is something not much talked about, but that's pretty interesting to know.
I also particularly like this ESG and environmental science consulting that these guys are talking about. Like this is something that I'm actually interested in as well, and this is something that I took away from this speaker session as well. So it's fascinating to see such different perspectives and the potential disruptive consulting branches. Keep those ideas coming, and we'll continue to discuss about the different varieties of consulting throughout our session today. That is about the topic, consulting and its allied branches. As you all know, today's session, as I've just said, is about consulting and its allied branches. Breaking into consulting is about understanding the diverse specializations within the field, recognizing the unique strengths each branch offers, and how they can transform businesses. We are here to guide you through this comprehensive exploration, providing insights and wisdom to navigate the ever-changing consulting biosphere effectively.
That's right, Dave. And we have the perfect expert joining us today. Someone who has mastered the art of consulting and has helped numerous firms unlock their full potential. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome our esteemed speaker, Mr. Awiral Gupta.
Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker for today's session, Mr. Awiral Gupta. He holds a bachelor's degree in technology, majoring in mechanical engineering from the Delhi Technological University. During his MBA, Mr. Awiral interned with Goldman Sachs Investment Banking Division, specifically with the emerging markets mergers and acquisition coverage team, where his exceptional performance earned him a pre-placement offer to join the team permanently. Previously, Mr. Awiral was a senior associate at the Boston Consulting Group, where he specialized in advising clients in the financial services, healthcare, and public sector spaces. Mr. Awiral currently serves as a group manager in the Strategy and Business Operations Division at Navi. We are honored to have Mr. Awiral with us today to share his insights and experiences in the consulting industry. I request you all to please give him a warm welcome.
It's an immense pleasure to have you here today, sir. We would love to hear from you, and we are sure that everyone would leave with amazing learnings today. Over to you, sir.
Got it. Thanks a lot. Can you guys see me, hear me clearly?
Yes, sir,
Yes,
you're
sir.
perfectly audible and visible.
Great. Thanks a lot, dear, for the very warm welcome. I think काफी तारीफ कर दिया, but all right, man. I think I'll just keep this session very free flowing, and more interactive than more like a lecture. But essentially, just wanted to first understand, read the room in terms of what you guys would want to take as the top 2 or 3 takeaways. So when we talk about consulting, there is like, how do I prepare for consulting? What will I do when I get into consulting, and what are the different types of consulting I can do, right? So I just wanted to understand how much of my time you would want me to, spend on each of these, how to prepare. If you guys don't want me to touch that topic, I can, talk about what do you do as a consultant, and more about, what are the different branches in consulting. If anyone can, give me a quick overview of what you would like to, delve deep into, that'll be super helpful. Anyone of the organizers also, like, if you want me to touch each of these individually also, then I'm more than happy talk about it.
Like you can explain the trajectory in consulting, like exit options.
Exit options, okay. All right, so let me bring some structure into it. So I'll touch briefly into my experience of preparing for consulting, and how what are the best tips and tricks in terms of what the recruiters look out for, and how you can set yourself up well. I think I'll spend roughly 5 to 7 minutes there. I'll spend some time in terms of what I did as a management consultant, and what you can expect out of strategy consulting, which is one branch of consulting, and the other part of the call I'll keep on what are the different types of consulting you do, and of course exit options I'll touch upon towards the end, if that works. Cool. I don't have any presentations or decks, sadly, so I'll just be speaking from my experience. If you guys want to take notes, you can take notes. Else, we can just have a chit chat towards the end. I'll try to keep as much time as possible for question and answers towards the end. But yeah, I think coming back to getting into consulting, I always wanted to growing up, I was when I was in your shoes, in final year of undergrad, I always wondered what consulting is like, what's the hype behind it, and what do consultants actually do? Like, why is there so much furor about this specific branch? I think just getting into consulting is through your through campuses, essentially, is through preparing for consulting case type interviews. I think some of you would have heard about it, which essentially means how do you structure your answers during interviews. So there are 2 types of interviews, I would say. One is case interviews, and the other is general interviews. Consulting is heavily skewed towards having case interviews, kind of a format wherein the interviewer would give you a problem statement. It could be a business situation, it could be a guesstimate, and they'd expect you to solve it in a structured manner. What's more important in these type of interviews is not to get to the accurate right answer, but the approach that you use for solving that business case or that business situation is essentially what the recruiters look out for. During my time, I prepared through your standard run-of-the-mill consulting textbooks. For getting into them, you can refer to your case in point, case interviews, cracked, any of the other textbooks that are broadly available. But essentially, the focus in case interviews is not to understand your journey or your history or what you've done in a specific internship. It's not about you, but it's about the problem that you guys will be solving during the interview. The other type of interview, which is your general interview, I would like to call it, is wherein the interviewers would want to understand more about your experience, your internship stints, any projects that you've done, which are interesting, any positions of responsibilities you've held, etc., etc. So those are the 2 types of interviews that usually one can expect before getting into consulting. Yeah, that's standard. I think I applied through the campus hiring programs. It was a fairly streamlined process. Interestingly, I interviewed across BCG, McKinsey, and Bain during my time in undergrad, and also during my time with postgrad. I interviewed with BCG and fortunately got through towards the end. That's how my journey was. It was through consulting case interviews. That's now once you get into consulting, what do you exactly do? So I would just thematically start with what consulting means, and what are the different branches, and probably you guys can figure out or try to piece it in your head as to how things fall into different buckets. But consulting in general is just as advisory, right? So to consult someone is to take someone's advice. That's essentially what consulting means. And if you're using it for a business use case, that is what we technically call consulting as. And within giving advice, there can be different types of advice that you can give, right? So there can be someone who can advise you on, the big picture, the long-term things, which is technically called strategy consulting. There can be someone who can advise you on, how to run your day-to-day operations. How do you actually implement stuff and, day-to-day run your business in a more better, efficient manner. That is what we call, implementation consulting. Then consulting can also be, focused in a particular domain, in a particular niche. So I heard a few people, say tech consulting, or somebody say ESG consulting, or, policy consulting. Those are different types of consulting, which is focused on a particular domain. So when I talk about tech consulting, it's basically, it would be specific to for a long-term or even short-term strategy related to the tech aspect of the business. If I'm talking about financial consulting or financial advisory, it could be long-term or short-term, specific to, just the finance function, or how to run, optimize your profits or optimize your costs in a business. That is what we would call financial advisory or financial consulting. There is another type of consulting which is called, development consulting, wherein the motive is not to make money, or motive is not profits, or motive is not even technology implementation. The motive is, how can I develop things faster from the public sector view? So that is what is called development consulting. A couple of interesting firms do a lot of good work there, like Dalberg. Let me start off with the very broad branch of consulting, which is called strategy consulting or management consulting. Strategy consulting or management consulting, from its word is very simple. It's just about focusing on strategy of the company, which essentially means that a long-term plan. So strategy is a long-term plan. And any company which takes a very long-term view with respect to advising its clients, it's called strategy consulting. So strategy is anywhere beyond a 3 to 4 year horizon. So let's say if a company is wanting to take help on what business do I open right now, which can give me good returns after 5 years, or how can I try to optimize my business right now, which can give me 2x returns, 5x returns after 5 years or even 10 years. What is the kind of investments do I need to make? How do I organize my entire organizational hierarchy? So these are the kind of problem statements people, whenever they want a very long-term answer, they want a long-term sustainable, long-term focused answer. That is generally what is called strategy or strategy or management consulting. A few firms which specialize specifically in strategy consulting, of course, is your MBBs, your BCG, McKinsey, and Bain. These are the top 3 strategy consulting firms. Then after that, you have your second tier of consulting firms, which offer more slightly less strategy, but little more implementation as well. So think of it as a cascading pillar. At the top of the pillar, you can look at it as companies offering only pure strategy consulting with some bit of implementation. Then you can have a middle layer, which is called mid-level strategy consulting, which offer a decent mix of strategy as well as implementation. And then you have a bottom layer of consulting companies which offer less strategy but a lot of implementation focused. So if I were to put the top three companies in the first layer, it would be McKinsey, Bain, and Boston, which do a lot of strategy, slightly less implementation. Companies that do a middle, in terms of mid layer between strategy as well as implementation would be your, let's say, your Accentures or EY Parthenons or slightly AT Kearney a bit. And then you'd have your bottom layer, which would be, your big fours, your Deloitte, EY, PwC, and KPMG, who would do more on operational side and slightly less on the strategy side. And how these consulting firms are, structured is that they have teams essentially working in small pods. So let's say you get into consulting. How would your team be functioned? How do you even work within consulting? I'll speak about that a bit for a few minutes. So these think of consulting as a bunch of a lot of people at different designations, right? So you have, let's say, a consulting firm might have 1,000 consultants, out of which 100 would be partners, 300 to 400 would be principals or project leaders, and let's say 500 to 600 would be your associates and consultants, right? You have this pool of a lot of advisors. Now, how do you even structure teams, or how do they work? It's essentially across different practice areas. By practice area, I basically mean an industry. So let's say if you think of a grid wherein each of the columns would be your different industries. One could be finance, one could be pharmaceuticals, one could be insurance companies, banking companies, petroleum companies, FMCG companies. So you have different types of domains and industries in which teams work, and they are usually structured in teams of 5 to 6 members each. So let's say one team, let's say working on, let's say strategy consulting for a financial services company, would have a mix of people across the partner layer, the principals, the project leaders, as well as your associates, analysts, and consultants. A typical team on a particular project is usually comprised of one partner, 1 to 2 project leaders, and 3 to 4 um, associates or consultants. So a typical team working on a case is comprised of roughly 4 to 7 people, not less than usually 4 and not more than usually 7 or 8 people working on a particular project. And these projects, as I mentioned, are categorized into different sectors. So let's say once you enter consulting, if you don't have any good idea about which industry you want to work in, typically it is, you can choose any particular industry which has, you're most interested in, work around in different industries for, let's say, 1 or 2 years, and then choose industry you really like, and then stick to it for the next 4 or 5 years if you plan to stick in consulting for the long run. So that's how, teams are shuffled within a consulting firm. Usually you work in teams of 4 to 6 people. A typical strategy consulting assignment or your duration of a project is anywhere between 3 to 4 months. And as you move more towards the implementation side, the project's duration become longer and longer. So let's say an implementation project is usually stretching from around 8 to 12 months. A strategy project might be shorter in duration. It would be lasting for around 3 to 4 months. That's how the duration of the projects are, structured. And typically, you'll see projects in Big Fours, which are more inclined towards implementation, are longer in duration, versus projects with, your McKinsey, BCG, and Bain, which are more strategic in focus, are slightly lesser in duration. How does a day-to-day look like if you're working in consulting? I think it's fairly structured, I would say. I can speak a bit about my experience. So I primarily worked on strategy consulting pieces. So in my 1.5 years at BCG, I worked on 5 cases. 3 of them were with financial services companies. One was with the public sector company, and one was with a healthcare services player in the healthcare industry. I tried to mix the different types of industries I got exposure to, and I really like financial services industry, and then hence I was able to exit into a startup which was focused in financial services. So that was where my interest area lied. On a day-to-day, what you'd be working on, let's say if I talk about any strategy project, you'll have one problem statement that the client needs to solve for, right? So let's say in the case with, let's say I was working with a healthcare player, so their business was running hospitals, and they said that, okay, fine, we are at a certain profitability level, let's say 50 crores per year, whatever it is. We want to double our profits after 3 or 4 years. What do you think we should do? So that's the kind of a problem statement that the business gave us. And then essentially our team was divided into pods of four people, 2 teams each. One was working on one part of the project, and one was working on the other part of the project. Usually this strategy project was in duration from 3 to 4 months actually. And on a day-to-day, your typical day would start in the morning, say 9 or 10 a.m. It would be comprised of some meetings with your boss in terms of yesterday's progress. So you call them stand-ups or daily huddles. Then in the afternoon, you'll spend time either talking to the client or you're analyzing the data that you have, preparing some Excel models, preparing some, presentations. Towards the afternoon, you'd sit at your client site, you'd try to figure out answers through different hypotheses. So consulting is in general, looking at a lot of data and talking to a lot of people. If I were to put it in a simple 2-word answer, it's not a lot of heavy tech experience you need, not a lot of code that you have to write, actually no code you have to write. You don't have to do a lot of technical things. It's just about talking to people and analyzing data, and just primarily using your brain to, what could fit in what scenario, and just trying to understand how to solve that problem, specifically. It is not that you find a solution in one day or one go. It's usually not like that. Consulting projects are designed to be 3 to 6 months or even 12 months long, because you keep on course correcting your output rather than trying different solutions. So let's say if you go with one version of an output, you go back and forth with the client, back and forth within your team, go back, try test something out, look at data, and then calibrate some part of the solution, then go back again, try it out. So it's more iterative in nature. You're eventually building up to something rather than just saying that, okay, fine, I found out a solution on day one, let's move on to the second problem. So it's a lot of back and forth at times. That's how the day looks like. Usually a typical hours in consulting are slightly more longer than other firms. On an average, in my experience, I spent around I don't know, roughly 12 to 14 hours a day across 5 days a week. And this included travel as well. So consulting is a branch wherein if you do front end consulting, which is client facing, you'll have to travel quite a bit, usually in and around the client location or client site. So that takes away some part of the bit on different types of whatever you guys feel like.
You can go on, sir.
All right, great. Cool. So I think talking about how to get into consulting, what do you do as a consultant, how are consulting firms structured within them. I'll move on to the other bit, which is what are the different opportunities in different types of consulting and what do they do, and then we can open the floor for any questions towards the last 20-30 minutes. Cool. So I think I spoke about strategy consulting, I spoke about implementation consulting. There are different branches. There can be different firms which offer a niche. So think of it as the same grid. You think of domains and functions vertically, and you think horizontally. It can either be strategy or it can be the implementation. So let's say you can do strategy consulting for a financial services firm. You can do implementation for a tech consulting firm. You can do strategy for pharma. You can also do implementation for a pharma, right? When I say tech consultants, they could be either doing strategy or implementation for these companies, but the nature of work is curtailed specifically in this vertical domain. And that is essentially what your niche consulting companies are called. So you have your tech consulting companies like Everest. You have your development consulting firms like Talberg. You have policy consulting firms, let's say like Speyside or TCF or others, which essentially do the same thing but only in that domain. A typical day in their lives is also very similar structured. Essentially, it's looking at a lot of data, but probably in some different niche types of consulting, you'll have to use more evolved tools or more evolved, skills on the job. So, for example, let's say if it's an analytics consulting firm or a data consulting firm, you might be required to, have some expertise in, let's say, writing Python code or SQL code, or might be required to, learn Alteryx or Tableau or some of these tools which are more niche in nature, specific to that sector. Essentially that's on different types of consulting. I'll quickly also touch upon the different branches which are associated usually with consulting and which are usually talked about in the non-tech space a lot, and the exit options that you can get. So I think a lot of you would have heard about product management. A lot of you would have also heard about internal strategy or CEO's office roles or CXO's office roles. Strategy and operations. The work that I do is also a different branch within consulting, not within consulting, but has some parallels. So I would say that these are all parallel job trajectories which do similar work in terms of advisory, but are slightly more different in terms of day-to-day nature. Other exit options in consulting also include venture capital, private equity. I'll briefly touch upon those as well. But yeah, let me, after speaking about consulting and, different types within consulting, if you switch tracks and you go to another parallel lane, which is, let's say, product management, it's essentially the work you'll be doing is more or less similar, but it is focused on a particular product. So let's say, if I were to visualize it, let's say in a company, you have your tech people. There are people who write code, who are your developers. And there are people who are businessmen, right? Who are, your CMOs, CXOs, CFOs, or people who are business heads who take business critical decisions and are the people, responsible for managing the profit and loss or, managing the liquidity of the business, a particular business function. How do you get the tech people to understand what the business people are saying, and how do you get the business people to implement what you want through your tech people? This role, which bridges this gap, essentially is product management. It's essentially any company, if they have any digital product, it could be an app, it could be a website, it could be anything which has a digital existence for the company, and product management is a role which bridges this gap within the company between your tech folks who develop it and the business people who want to get things moving. As a product manager, your job is essentially to optimize your product either for the customers or for your business people, and that is what they do. It's kind of advisory on the specific product, right? So, for example, a product manager at Flipkart or a product manager at Navi or a product manager at PhonePe would be, solving problems like how can I get more users on my platform, how to display which ad banner where, what should be the color of this, how should the real estate in the page be designed, what are the new features that can go live on the product. So let's say if you have a Zomato app, if I click on this button, how should the user experience look like? What purpose does it serve? How do my payment screens on the page look like? How do my notifications come in? Everything visually that has got to do with the user experience of the product, as well as how to optimize at the back end in terms of technology is what a product manager does. Their day-to-day lives would also be similar. Essentially, they also have to talk to a bunch of people and look at data and get the things moving. And they're required to be good in stakeholder management, because the job of a product manager is not just, so in strategy consulting, your counterpart is your client, you're solving for the client, but as a product manager, you're solving for your tech people as well as you're solving for your business people, right? So that's the slight nuance that comes in. But yeah, I think product management is something which has picked up because more and more companies want more and more digital presence. They want more in their own apps. They want their own websites, and stuff. So that's essentially the role of a product manager. Internal strategy and CEO's office or CXO's office roles are also similar to strategy consulting, but this is all internal facing. So let's say in consulting companies, you will be part of the company and you will be advising different companies. But in internal strategy or CEO's office roles, you'll be advising the CXO of the same firm. So you'll be an on-roll employee within that firm, and you'll be helping in taking strategic decisions for that firm only. A typical day in the life of a CXO's office is very similar to your typical day in your strategy consulting at your McKinsey, Bain, or Boston. But your client is essentially your CEO or your CXO who wants to, let's say, take a business recommendation to the board or implement something large scale or long term. That is when internal strategy roles or CEO's office, CXO's office roles add value. So your day-to-day there, of course, is going to be looking at a bunch of data and talking to a lot of internal stakeholders. So let's say it could be business heads, could be employees, could be ground force, could be anyone, but within the same company, to try to take more strategic calls for the long-term picture for that specific company. I'll talk a bit about strategy and operations. How that is also slightly different from your pure strategy role. Strategy and operations is essentially exactly what it means. It's to look at strategy, but specifically for operations functions, or it's a mix. The day-to-day job is not, and also that's different from CXO's office roles, because CXO's office roles are, again, focused on long-term projects. So they would, of course, have more similarity with strategy consulting, but strategy and operations role have more similarity with implementation consulting, wherein you're sticking with a particular division for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and implementing it day